Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, to wherever you are in the world joining us tonight. It is, of course, a very, very special evening for us. We're celebrating 10 years of the science of connection, and in particular the work of Dr. Suzanne Zeedyk. And, you know, she's been at great pains to tell me that it's about the science and it's not about Suzanne. And she has rammed that home to me numerous times prior to us starting the live broadcast. So I'm going to try very much to bring it back to the science, but I do suspect that we will be looking at the work of Dr. Suzanne Zeedyk for the past 10 years.
Gary, it is lovely to be here with you always. It's just a fabulous party to have everyone come and celebrate.
We have well over 400 people with us. Let's start at the beginning, if I may. And I'm sure that some people who are tuning in tonight will know some of this story, but I want you to recollect. So you were at the University of Dundee, and you had a well-paid job. You know, you were doing extremely well, and then all of a sudden one day you decided to go it alone. And we've told that story a few times. Tell me how that came about.
Gary, it wasn't all of a sudden one day. It was a slow process. I just became increasingly aware over those 20 years as a research scientist that other people did not have access to the science that I loved and that I thought was important. And after a while, it just became kind of a moral imperative. What was the science for if we couldn't get it to the people who spend time with babies? And so I took this decision to step away from full-time academic work and see if I could reach the public with what I call the science of connection.
Was it scary for you?
It was terrifying. I didn't know anyone else who had ever tried this. I didn't know if I could feed myself. I didn't have a model to work on, and therefore I had panic attacks. So because sometimes my brain just said, what are you doing? You have wanted to be an academic your whole life. What are you doing? But I had heard the advice that your worst regrets in life are the ones that the opportunities you didn't take. And I thought maybe that was true. And so I took this chance to step out into the public, and I have never looked back even for a day. In fact, I see myself really as doing what I did with my students in all those years in academia. I just have a whole lot more students across the world.
I'm really interested in the academic side in terms of what your academic peers maybe thought of what you started to do and what you're doing now, because it's not ordinary, is it, that we get scientists, and I mean this with the utmost respect, that we get scientists speaking in everyday language. So what was the reaction of some of your colleagues? If you're happy to share that, of course.
Gary, it's a great question. And in fact, one of my scientific colleagues is here tonight, Vassi Reddy, who we will hear from later. Vassi was worried about me. What happens to the science if you're not continuing to publish? I took that as a mark of Vassi's care that she was worried. I think others thought, others were really excited for me and thought it was exciting. I think some others were a bit doubtful because when you're an academic, you like producing the knowledge, and sometimes reaching out to the public is not where all academics think the action is. I just got ballsy and decided that people needed to be able to think about what happens in real lives, and I just found ways to continue to do it because I really do believe everybody deserves to know this and to get a chance to think about what it means in real life.
The word Bolshe and Dr. Suzanne Zeedyk going together, I never knew that. Caroline Davidson, I was at the launch of Connect a Baby, and like Gary thought, who is this woman? And followed you ever since. Kate Johnston, I loved going to the pub with Suzanne and Brett after the launch of Upstart Dundee. We've got lots of people to speak to, Suzanne, but before I do that, and we'll come back to your career and your life, and it is very much about the science, and I've been told very, very strictly that it's about the science, and we will keep coming back to the science. But tell me about some of the challenges that you've had in terms of getting your message out there, your work out there? What have been some of the challenges?
Gosh, Gary. Some of the challenges are at a really basic level. How do you feed yourself doing this? So later, we're going to announce some of the surprises and the new resources. I just want to say thank you to every single person who purchases any of the resources we sell. I want to say thank you to every single partner who has ever paid a fee to have me come and speak. That sounds really basic, but if people weren't doing that, we wouldn't be here tonight. So I try to use my time wisely, and I'm really happy to spread widely my time, but I can only do that because we're bringing in enough of an income to sustain that. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who does that. Every single bit of that requires creativity. Maybe that doesn't sound very grand, but if you don't figure out how to do some of the basics, you don't get to do a lot of the exciting bit.
We're going to go to where it all started.
I think it's really important that everyday experiences and the little everyday experiences, which we as people forget, we as psychologists or we as parents forget once our kids have grown up, or because we're studying a different age, or because we're interested in something else. I think it's really important that the little everyday experiences, which signify so much in terms of telling us about interpersonal knowledge about minds, for example, should be taken seriously. And I think these everyday little experiences occur more to parents than they do in the lab. They're often invisible in the lab. I mean, that's no surprise. So, and parents have this knowledge. I think it's really worth empowering, if you like, to use a cliched term, parents to record, to note, to observe, and to understand from these little things, which, in science you usually call them anecdotes, so you kind of dismiss them. But they are as important as the laboratory experiments, and they certainly prepare the ground for the laboratory experiments. Often they tell us quite a lot of different things, so I think it's important that that be heard.
Let's bring in a lady now who featured in the clip, who's a very good friend and a wonderful colleague of yours, Vassi Reddy. Vassi, hello, good evening to you.
I'm a bit stunned, actually. I kind of was writing down, I know I can say this about Suzanne and that about Suzanne, and I watched this film and I'm thinking, I've lost it all. It's just like, it's gripped me in a way that I hadn't realized I was being gripped. But anyway, more of that in a minute.
Well, that's a wonderful place to be, I think.
Yes.
When you saw the clip, did memories of 10 years ago come flooding back?
Yeah, it was snowy, and Suzanne was in this house in the middle of nowhere in Scotland, and it was amazing. It was quite an amazing experience, both the filming and being there with her. And yes, indeed, the journey that was at the start of the journey. So it was like a kind of a very different time. I remember that. I remember it very well, in fact.
What were the challenges of translating the science to the wider public?
Okay, I think for me personally, I've seen the challenge as being one of as I said in that clip, of empowering the people who are involved with babies, of giving them the credit of knowing something which the scientists do not know, or if they know, they've forgotten, right? So to take it kind of seriously as a different way of knowing and a different way of relating, and that it is really important to do that. Okay, so that's kind of what's been my journey. So when I heard Suzanne just now say that when she gave up her job, and yeah, I was scared for you, Suzanne. I kind of was thinking, oh my God, this mad woman, what is she doing? And yeah, I know she's kind of like all enthusiastic, but like, you know, she's got to live and all that sort of stuff, right? So, but when you said just now, it was actually like giving up one set of students for a much larger set of students. My immediate reaction on hearing you say that was, you know, you really are wrong. It isn't just about translating the science to the wider world, you know? It isn't just that. I think actually what you do is, because you are that kind of person, is you make connections. So it isn't about what you say to people. Yeah, you do that. And actually reading all those comments about how that I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is really about teaching and translating science. But my gut feeling is that you do something that not many other people could do, which is that you live connection. And I'm not just saying that to be cute, as it were. You do it in a way that I don't have the guts to do, I think. That's kind of what I've been every time I'm writing, I'm trying to write, I keep trying to write. And I'm thinking there's something that I'm missing in terms of the implications of what I'm saying is important. I'm not doing it. I'm writing about it. And Suzanne, I mean, I know you're still writing. I know you've just written that wonderful chapter for the Festschrift for Colwyn Trevarson, which is a completely academic piece of work, and you've been helping us with reviewing and so on. But I know you're still doing that, but what you do is outside of your control. It is who you are. You connect, and in doing that, I think you're creating a different world. I might stop me if I'm going on too much. This is really not what I planned to say, but it reminds me of Darwin's earthworms, right? Even earthworms create their environment, change their world by, I don't really remember I don't really know the sort of the details of it, by drawing in leaves in different ways to create their burrows, to actually shape their world. And I think, Suzanne, it is beyond you to stop doing that. You are creating a different world.
So Vassi, may I ask a question before we go on to our next guests? How do you think the work that Suzanne has done and the science of connection, how has that changed the way that we think now from where we were 10 years ago?
Well, I mean, that's an empirical question. And I think just looking at the things that Suzanne has achieved, particularly in Scotland. I mean, Scotland's kind of got this really welcoming atmosphere, welcoming kind of. It's a good place to be for making change. And I think what she's done has been. I think she's created change beyond just this translation thing. So, okay, if you're going to stop me now, I'm going to end with a quote,
okay,
which is E.M. Forster, and it's a very famous quote, and everybody knows it, but everybody only knows the first two words, and the first two words are only connect, okay? But the rest of the quote actually, I think, applies very much more to Suzanne and to the work that she's been doing, which is this connections between people, the connection of the science to living. And the rest of the quote goes, only connect. That was the whole of her sermon. Only connect the prose and the passion, and both will be exalted, and human love will be seen at its height, live in fragments no longer. And I think honestly, Suzanne, I kind of bow in admiration to your integrity and your courage. Thank you.
Vassi, thank you so much
I really
indeed.
have to tell you.
Gary, can I come in?
Absolutely.
I know I told you not to call on me, and I'm just overturning all the things I said. Can I please let everyone know here that you have just heard from one of the UK's leading infant scientists? And I know Vasu is likely to go, no, 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 but it's true. Vasu has changed the way that we understand babies' capacity to read other people. Vasu is one of the few scientists I know whose science is regularly makes it into the newspapers, because the kinds of questions that he explores feel accessible. So I just want people who have no idea who Vasu is. And part of the fun of tonight is that we're bringing together lots of sectors. That's who just spoke to us. And that's who I think the public deserves to hear from and to know of her work, because the vision that she and colleagues who work with her offer of babies changes our understanding of who they are and therefore who we are. So Vasu, I am honored to continue to be your colleague.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Vassi Reddy, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you with us tonight. Thank you. So let's move on to further on to our guest list. We've got quite a number of people to speak to tonight, and some people I've met previously and I've had the honour of interviewing and talking to, and certainly learning about Connection over the past 4 or 5 years that that Suzanne and I have been working together. Is Jennifer Nissen, who is the head teacher at Pachuca East Primary School. Jen, joining us by satellite from Fife. How are you?
Oh, Gary, nice to see you again. You're looking very dapper.
You're a darling. I'm giving you a virtual hug. I'm giving you a virtual hug.
It's lovely to be working with you again.
Yeah, likewise, Jen. Tell me about how you and Suzanne came to work together, and then of course how the thoughts of the science of connection has affected you, your staff, and the way that you operate your school.
The first time I heard Suzanne speak was at a head teachers conference, and she spoke about the saber-toothed tigers and teddies. And I had turned to my colleagues during it and said, we need to get her to our cluster. So straight afterwards, the head teachers in my coven, I call it my coven, it's a cluster of head teachers, not a coven, but we got together and decided that we would blow the CPD budget and bring Suzanne in to speak to everybody who worked in that cluster. And it was amazing. Everybody heard the same story, and I watched my team really closely throughout that first presentation, and they all nodded. They all got it. They all had that insight. And Suzanne and I were chatting afterwards over coffee, dreadful coffee and a dried up biscuit that you get at these CPD events. And I told her about it was a revelation I'd had, an epiphany, a blonde moment, call it what you will, where I had realised I'd watched a child. We use the term distress quite easily now, but in those days, I'm going back 10 years, very few people, I don't know anybody else was using that expression in terms of, it was misbehaviour, then it was challenging behaviour. Those things never ever sat right with me. And I had observed a little man going through a fairly traumatic experience over a period of time. And this culminated in an event, and I won't go over the story because I know that Suzanne tells this story frequently. I tell it. Most people here tonight will have heard that story. And I went away over, and it bothered me over the weekend. And I went back to my 2 deputies on Monday, on that Monday, and said, right, see if you can contradict me on this. I cannot think of a single episode where a child has misbehaved, displayed challenging behaviour, kicked off, call it what you will, that was not driven by distress, either their distress or the adult's distress. And Suzanne went, oh my God, you're speaking about And we had a long chat and we just swapped contact details. And months and months later, one of my pupil support assistants who had heard Suzanne speak came rushing into my office. I was on another call. She said, "You missed a call from Suzanne Zeedyk." So that started off, as you know, we then went on to the podcast and that spread it a bit further. Somehow or other found myself on stage at the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh. It was great though. I remember looking up at that first slide and seeing the Connected Baby logo in the corner and thinking, Jen, you're going to be okay here. You're part of something bigger. You don't understand it yet, but you're part of something much bigger. And it's grown from there, that understanding that distress features in so many behaviours. It changes your mind. It changes your perspective. So we took it from the science of connection and brought that to the language of connection.
So Jen, tell us as well, because we've got, like I said, 400 plus people on the call tonight, and I'm sure that some people won't be aware of the stories. But what sort of effect did it have on the staff and the pupils by changing language? Was it challenging initially, or was it something that was embedded into the school quite easily?
We were incredibly sneaky about it. Going back to those times, I was the most consultative head teacher you could imagine. People were bored with me consulting them. They'd got to the stage where they were begging me, look, please just write the school improvement plan and we'll pretend we've read it. So we didn't actually consult with them at all. As a management team, we just started using the word distress. And I've always, at Pachuca East, I've always been blessed there with a compassionate team. It was systemic. They absorbed it. And we were aware of it becoming normal. It just became a normal part of our conversations. And I thought we'd gone totally under the radar and sneaked that in. I thought we'd played that curveball really well. Until I went into the staff room one day, and I don't know what had annoyed me. I said, I'm fizzing about whatever had happened. And one of my colleagues said, now, Jen, you're not angry, you're just distressed. I thought they've probably seen through this. But they took it on, and that changed. Somebody says, if you, as a manager, as a head of establishment, if I walk into a situation and I think a child is being challenging, that puts a whole set of demands on me in terms of meeting that challenge, beating that challenge, making sure that challenge never recurs. If you say to somebody like this, if you go in your head, I'm dealing with somebody who is in distress, your immediate impulse is to offer comfort. And that's because we're humans. That's because there is that innate connection. I always say we're talking, never mind the science, we're talking about big people and little people. And the big people have to help. That's as simple as that.
We know that one of the biggest stories of last week and maybe the week before was about getting children, either whether in primary or secondary school, back into education after the prolonged lockdown. What can schools, what can the education world learn from what you've adopted in school? Because we've talked about spending, or the story was talking about spending millions and millions and millions of pounds, but sometimes in the wrong places. Is what you've adopted in the school a potential solution for getting children back into education after this lockdown?
I would say yes. And don't tell anybody this, apart from the 400 people in the room. It doesn't require any training to do this. And it doesn't cost any money. It is changing people's hearts and minds. And if you take it from, if you start from a very positive standpoint, you have got a huge chance of success. One of the things that I have recently started doing with children who are finding it trickier than others is I will sit down with them and explain the research. I'll explain what I'm doing. I had a conversation with a primary 7 girl who is very, very anxious and sometimes displays that in, you know, behaviours that maybe another setting might not be so tolerant of, or so patient with. And when I say we, I mean everybody who deals with that wee girl knows her. And I sat her down and I said, look, this is what we do with you. And I showed her the, you know, regulate, relate, reason diagram. And I said, and I've actually printed that out for her and laminated it for her so she can take that to secondary. And she's quite a gutsy wee lady. She will say, this is what you have to do. And other adults will get that connection too. We talk about rupture and repair. We talk about window of tolerance. I've got a school support assistant that talks about oxytocin. When she hugs children, she'll say, right, come on, 20-second hug. There's our children who say, I need a 20-second hug. They get the science.
Well, Jen, I've got to say, messages coming in based on what you're saying. Lena Carter, big people and little people, and the big people have to help. Amen. Lovely, Jen. There you go. What a nice way to end. Jen, great to see you again. More power to your elbow, and love to everybody in the school.
Eric, can I, in a moment, can I just let anybody who doesn't get it clearly enough yet, we have just heard from one of the people who I consider to be one of the leading head teachers in Scotland. And here is why she's leading. Because she truly has also helped to create a different world. The story that I tell of the simple language shift from challenging behavior to distressed behavior. All it was a language shift. I've had the privilege of telling that story in numerous places, and I watch people write that down. So the story of Jen's school's language shift has changed the world for children. The song that we had, for those of you who were here really early, of Happy Birthday, that was a song written by Stevie Wonder for Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King had a vision for a different world. And so I wanted to have that piece of music, not only because I knew it would lift the energy, because David Cameron, who I know is here tonight, has taught me the power of music in his own presentations. I chose that one specially because it talks about a different world, which is what Martin Luther King wanted, and Stevie Wonder was trying to find a way to tell that. I'm delighted, Jen, that you are here tonight because you two are trying to find a different world, and just telling your story, I can see has made a tremendous difference across Scotland and beyond. So I am honored to know you and be your colleague.
Lovely.
Dan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Jen. And I'll see you very soon. So let's move from education to the police. And I'm delighted to introduce John Carnican, retired Detective Chief Superintendent, co-director of the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit. John, it's so good to see you again. You're looking great. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. I'm feeling a little underdressed, Gary.
It's the old BBC style.
Not been offered a hug.
Virtual hug. There we go. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
I'm going to have to do that for everyone now, even people that I've not met, but we'll go for it. So John, absolute pleasure to see you. Tell me about how the work of Suzanne and the Science of Connection helped the Violence Reduction Unit to get to where it is today.
Yeah, how did it? I should say before I start, when Suzanne said, I want you to share a few memories, I thought, I'm actually at that age now where I need to share them quickly because I'm making so many new ones that these other ones are just, they're falling off the background. I think every brain cell dies off and some critical information's on the next one. I'm in trouble. We were Karen McCluskey and I were working to try and reduce violence in Scotland. First of all, homicide, and then we realized, well, it needs to be violence. It can't just be homicide. And we started just following evidence. We started working out that it was actually a public health thing, which made so much sense. It gave us a new language. And so we started to follow that evidence. And we came to early years and the importance of early years. And so I started to speak about this a bit more. And I was always, when we were hearing earlier about academics, that I was the so what guy. You know, academics knew all this stuff, and I'm saying, so what are you doing with it? Knowledge is not power. You need to do something with the bloody knowledge. And if you're not prepared to share it out, then you're just indulging yourself and you're costing us money we don't have. So I started speaking about it and always expecting someone at the back of the audience to say, excuse me, you're talking nonsense. And no one ever did. And so I became a little emboldened. I even spoke about forward-facing buggies. And I was really trying to, if the truth be known, pick a fight. I was trying to get things out in the open that we could discuss. And I was quoted in the paper of saying that the most important 4 years of a child's life are up to age 3. And I was using this, the notion that children are born on the same day, but they live in different houses in the same street, they go to the same school. Why is it one turns out to be a doctor, one turns out to be a police officer, one goes to jail, one becomes an addict? And so I was saying it was hugely important. And someone wrote in the paper, they went to a psychologist, probably not an academic psychologist, but they went to a psychologist to say, what do you think of this police officer who wants to be in delivery rooms? Now, trust me, I didn't want to be in any delivery rooms. But, and he said, it's nonsense. He should stick to what he should be doing, which is investigating murders. That's what he should be doing. So I thought, great, let's have a fight. And then one day in the office, the next day, there was a phone call. There's an American woman on the phone from Dundee, which was that was an interesting thing. So anyway, and it was Suzanne. And she said, I'd like to speak to you because I've written to the newspaper, give me your email address and I'll send you it. And she sent me this email that said, that police officer is in exactly the right place, but you know, it shouldn't be him that's there, but he's right to be talking about that. So we agreed to meet. So Karen and I traveled up to Dundee because at that time, 2005, I think, 2005, that time Karen McCluskey and I were speaking to anybody who would listen, you know, because it was all new. It was just anyone who would listen, we would speak to them. So we went to see Suzanne and we met in the Dundee Centre for Contemporary Arts. And we were there for about 4 hours. Because every time I was saying something, Suzanne was then applying science to it and saying, oh, that's because of that. I said, all right, what about this? And that's because of that. And so from there, it just, as I say, emboldened. And I used to start using, I used to use the expression emerging evidence, which meant that I had just found out about it. Because I couldn't believe that all this evidence was there and existed, and yet we were still doing what we were doing. It was absolutely abhorrent to me. And so that's what started. And then we just maintained that connection. I'm thinking about this, does this make sense? Yeah. And then, you know, I remember relating to my wife once that Suzanne had said, there was some research that said that babies' brains develop. And one of the things that can stimulate that is adults smiling at them. I said, oh, that's really cool. And my wife had said, don't you dare be smiling at strange children in the train. Don't, you know? And I thought, well, okay. So it's just been there. And I think the points that were made earlier by other contributors are hugely important, because it was about that connection and that notion that scientists are humans and cops are humans. And there's a language to begin with that we can start to discuss. When you speak to parents and they nod their head. And I used to say, if you spoke to the wee grey-haired lady who was standing at the bus stop in Maryhill Road in Glasgow and said, what's the problem? She'd say, it's the parents, son, it must be in the home. And it wasn't to blame the parents, but that woman recognised the importance that parents and adults play in babies and children's lives. And we've just, and the truth is, I don't want to put a damper in the evening, and I certainly, I don't mean to, but the truth is, we're still not there yet. We still have a culture that tolerates children and doesn't really love them. We've got some stars among us that really try hard. But until policy actually follows that and said, if you value parents, there's 2 years leave. My oldest daughter's, my grandson is 8 months old. He just started back work 2 weeks ago, and now we're looking after him. The trauma of mum having to leave him and all of that stuff, it's daft. And if we really valued it, and we did have that make Scotland the best place to grow up. That's what
Yeah.
we would do.
So I take your point, and I've heard you say that on numerous occasions, and in our interviews you've said that as well. Do you think we're getting there though? Are we making strides?
Yeah, I am, because the older I get, I realise it takes decades. I started off thinking, you know, why is this not happening now? This is really important. If we know this, get it done. But the truth is, we need to be patient. And I think one of the keys is that connection, change starts from the ground up. It starts at an individual level. And we shouldn't wait on policy. We shouldn't wait on manifestos. We shouldn't wait on any of these things. We just need to find the people that are doing what they're doing and doing it well, like Jen and others, and get behind them and talk about that and talk about it out loud. Because if we wait, you know, we advance until apprehended. You know, we carry on and do it. And there are lots of people out there doing it. But we always, because we live in a world where we think about systems and we think about organizations, we want to get everyone up to the line at the same time and everyone's stepping off. It ain't going to be like that. It's human. It's messy. We just need to keep pressing on, changing it one at a time and keep moving.
John, I'm going to move on to our next guest in just a moment, John. But I want to go to Suzanne before you leave us. Well, I said leave the screen. I hope you're not leaving the evening. Oh gosh, you're having your toast already. I'm envious. Suzanne, John was saying a few things there, and I couldn't quite read your reaction when we were talking. He was talking about being patient. What was your view there?
I don't want us to be patient. You taught me, John Carnican, that I did not have to be patient. So you just stop relaxing quite as much as that backbench is clearly doing, because I think we need impatience to keep changes happening in this country. I live in a country where the police talk about breastfeeding, health visitors, babies, and prams. John Carnican and Karen McCluskey made that possible, and it took them courage to do it at the time. I am proud to be your colleague, and I want the wider world to understand that it is possible for police officers to talk about babies, and I want developmental psychologists to understand why we need police officers to feel confident enough to do that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne. John, thank you. Get a cold one out of the fridge for me for 9 o'clock, will you? Appreciate it. All right, John. Good to see you. Let's move on to our next guest. And actually, this is a double header, as we tend to say in broadcasting terms. Kate Silverton is with us tonight. I'm delighted to say. Unfortunately, Kate has an extremely sore throat, and I think that's probably the mild way of putting it, Kate. So we want you to rest your voice tonight, but you are here in spirit. You are going to do some sign language for us, but I want to say it's great to have you on board. Broadcaster, journalist, author, that best-selling book, There's No Such Thing as Naughty. Congratulations and all that. And I know that you are an absolute powerhouse in terms of spreading the word of connection and actually being instrumental in the world of media. So, Kate, I've got to say that we've got a spokesperson for you, and we've gone for a parent, and how quite right that is as well. And I want to say good evening to Brian Carmichael. Hello, Brian. Good evening.
Hi, Gary. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good. And a parent of two, I believe?
Yeah, two young boys, Jack and Daniel.
How are they doing?
Fantastic. You know, handful at times, but what do you expect with two young boys that were similar to myself at that age? So no, they're doing great, thanks.
I'm absolutely delighted to hear that. So Kate has penned some words for us this evening, and I believe that you're going to read those out. So Brian, for once in my life, I will zip it and hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Gary. In Kate's words then, I am so sorry not to be able to do much more than wave at you all. As someone who talks for a living, you can imagine what this is like for me. But I am delighted to be here in person and celebrate with you all the wonderful, caring work of the woman who is Dr. Suzanne Zeedyk. What can I say that is unlikely to have been said already? Perhaps a little of how we, and indeed so many other people here this evening, met. Hello to you all. I have been doing my own research in the field of children's mental health. determined to retrain as a child psychotherapist, which I'm now doing, and raise awareness around ACEs, which at that point a few years ago was something of an unknown quantity here in England. I found myself following more and more people, all based in Scotland, intrigued to hear the commitment to Scotland becoming the first ACE-aware nation. And I thought to myself, they sound like my kind of people. Well, indeed they were. The incredible Pauline Scott was the first to reach out, inviting me up to the 2019 ACES conference in Glasgow, for which I shall be ever grateful. She has been an incredible force for good, as many of you will know, and indeed proved to be a kindred spirit for me. I had an idea about the programme I wanted to produce, a documentary for BBC's Panorama programme that would raise awareness around ACEs and highlight the work that all of you in Scotland, people like Pauline, Suzanne, John Carnican, Karen McCluskey, Niven Rennie, Ian Smith, James Docherty, Kevin Neary, and so many others who are doing work to help and support families and young people across the nation. Pauline gathered us all together, and there we hatched plans. I returned home from the conference full of hope and excitement at seeing so many good people coming together to affect change for the greater good. Now I had to persuade my bosses to commission a documentary. I remember the phone call I made to Suzanne in the US when I was standing by the pond here in my little village where I lived. And we discussed the panorama and how we make it happen, given that news can be sometimes, shall I say, be a little reticent to cover the most positive aspects of stories sometimes. The conversation proved to be a pivotal moment. Over the year later, I was back in Scotland to begin filming. The rest, as they say, is history. The documentary covered all aspects of society in Scotland, looking at how the police and prison services, the judiciary system, in education and in health are working so hard to raise awareness around trauma in childhood and how that can influence and shape the adult we become. The documentary was a resounding success. Even the editors back at the BBC began to consider out loud that that may be good news story that could be newsworthy. For my part, I was delighted, not least because I had made some pretty special relationships as a result. I might add at this point as well that one young man I kept in touch with, having filmed him at Pullman, is doing really well. He is now training with Timpsons, who also do such great work about attachment themselves. It is in these sort of encounters and outcomes that we find a great deal of hope. Those pebbles, when dropped in the pond, can have such a positive ripple effect. If it wasn't for you, Pauline, reaching out in the first place, then Rhys, the young man in question, might not have that job. You are all changing lives in the work that you do. Thank you. And let me now turn to Suzanne to say thank you to her. There are too few words to convey what I think of you, Suzanne, and how grateful I am that we met. The relationship has gone from panorama days to conversations, often very late at night, discussing the finer aspects of neuroscience, emotional regulation, and the research that tells us even babies can experience shame. You have taught me so much, and the breadth of your generosity is astounding. When I determined to write my book, There's No Such Thing as Naughty, to convey this information to parents, I knew just the person I wanted to feature in the chapters on stress response and emotional regulation. The book is scientifically hefty, shall we say. I wanted to convey the latest neuroscience, but in the simplest way possible, to help support parents I work with here in London and the children too. I wanted to explain why our children behave the way they do and what the language of their behaviour tells us. Suzanne has been there for me with a response for every query, giving me the confidence to ensure I was on the right track. Reading first, second, and third drafts of chapters I sent her. Always supportive and insightful with her feedback, and utterly brilliant with her specific contributions. I'm delighted to say the book has done rather well. A Sunday Times #1 bestseller, and I'm delighted, not for matters of personal pride, although I am very proud of it, but because with every book sold, Suzanne's work is brought to a wider audience. From Joe Wicks, who says the book has changed his life, through to the Duchess of Cambridge and the parents who reach out to me on Instagram to tell me how grateful they are for this support. I see the work we all do as teamwork. To affect change, we have to start at grassroots, to come together to support each other and celebrate our successes. Suzanne is a master at celebrating everyone else's successes, always supportive of people on social media, always working hard to highlight the work that people do to raise awareness around trauma. You work so hard, Suzanne, and have dedicated much of your life in helping others. You have dropped an almighty pebble in the pond that we are all privileged to swim in. Your work counts, and you affect change through that incredible spirit you infuse in us all. Thank you, and here's to the next 10 years. I hope I did that.
Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Beautiful words, Kate. Thank you very much. And that's a beautiful Scottish accent you have, Kate. I thought you did that really well. Absolutely great. But Brian, thank you for stepping into the breach. That was well read. Thank you so much indeed. Suzanne, a couple of words before we move on.
Brian, do you just want to tell people what it means to you as a parent to understand this stuff? Because that is the point of Kate's book.
Of course. 3 words that come to my mind. The first word is challenge, actually. This information has made me challenge my own behaviours as a parent and any potential impact, positive or negative, that this will have on my 2 boys, Jack and Daniel. I can assure you, it's not easy to think this way, especially for someone who has an ambivalent attachment style like me. The second word that comes to my mind is confidence. As I've gained more information and knowledge in the science of connection and attachment theory, I've become more confident as a parent, knowing I don't always get it right, which is important, but not to go into shame and be able to reflect and know I'm doing the best I can. And that ultimately the actions I am taking to create and develop stronger trusting relationships with my 2 boys will support their development later in life. The third word that comes to mind is empowerment. This learning has empowered me, first with decision making. Me and my partner Kelly have recently decided to give Jack another year at nursery, an advantage year, as Cameron Sprague has recently named it. I could never have done this 4 years ago. I wouldn't have had that confidence. The second way it's empowered me is to share this information, share my story, and more specifically with other parents. Parents need to know this information as far as I'm concerned. Otherwise, how can we expect our children to develop their infinite potential?
There is no one who deserves to know this more than parents. And what I love about the 2 of you is that you're working so hard to make sure that they get it. Thank you for that dedication.
Kate, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Please stick around for the rest of the program. It's really good to see you. Brian, as always, great to see you as well. And thank you for your wonderful words. Thank you again. Okay, let's move from parents and let's move to the arts. And we're moving over to, I think, the Emerald Isle now, actually. Anna Newell. Anna, good evening to you. Director and creator of Theatre Shows for Babies, one of the powerhouses behind Belfast Baby Day in 2015. when you and Suzanne worked together, which brought in, I understand, in the region of about 15,000 people. I know Belfast very well. I had the privilege of being the managing director at the radio station over there. So beautiful part of the world, beautiful people, absolutely loved it. And you know, if I could get back when we're out of COVID, I'll be back over for a party. So Anna, great to see you. Tell us a little bit about your work and the science of connection, and how Suzanne's fed into all that for you.
Okay, so, because I'm possibly the joker in the pack, and so I don't have to look at myself for the next 7 minutes, I've put together some photos to show you what Suzanne made me do. So I'm going to share my screen if I can do that. Okay, so this is me. I am a theatre maker. I'm based in the south of Ireland now, and I make shows for audiences of babies and early years and children with complex needs. And my youngest audience member was 4 days old, and here he is. And all of the work that I do is powered by the science of connection. I first met Suzanne actually nearly 30 years ago. 27 years ago, I accidentally started a large-scale women's a cappella harmony singing group in Dundee, as you do. And Suzanne was our super fan. She came to every single gig, and looking back, I just realized today that she loved it for the same reason that I started it, and that I loved it because the human voice is so connective, and people singing together is euphoric and uplifting and ultimately so connective. And then in 2011, I was about to make the first show that I made for children with complex needs, and I stumbled across this book of essays about strategies for communication with people who didn't have traditional verbal communication, and the editor was Suzanne. And not at all coincidentally, around about the same time, I had a major revelation about the reason of what I think theatre is. And I realized whilst working doing some creative consultation in a classroom of children with profound and multiple learning difficulties, that for me, theatre is one human being connecting with another human being, and that's it. And that my job is to create the conditions for that connection. And connection now and since then has absolutely been my lodestar, and now I'm the super fan. I do feel that Suzanne walks beside me, as do many of you. I cannot tell you how many times I've told the story about Paducah East Primary School, how I've told the story of the teddy bear policies, and everything that I do, how I make the shows, how the shows are nuanced from moment to moment with their audiences, how they're created in consultation with their audiences, how we talk about them, how I use portable performance spaces to get rid of visual noise, oral noise, and so that the show that I took to Broadway is exactly the same show that families saw in a church hall in Northern Ireland, because they deserve the same work. How we welcome the audience, and how we insist on having the very best artists to work with them. And so for me, the science helps me create these optimum conditions for connection. And what the arts does for me is it brings the alchemy of beauty into that arena. And I'm very clear that what I do is, I'm not a therapist. It's not therapy. It's not educational. It's not developmental. For me, it's about these children's and babies' absolutely fundamental human right to beauty. And the responses that we get from parents, I've never seen my baby respond in this way. My child is really scared of strangers, and at the end of 20 minutes was hugging one of your performers. I know it's absolutely because the work is completely underpinned by the science of connection. Suzanne also taught me that we're born with a biological imperative to connect, because the force is strong in the little ones. And what that made me think about, and I was inspired by Suzanne's work, I was inspired by Roots of Empathy, and I was inspired by my own experience of performing for babies. And I did a project called Connect. And with this project, we brought together 10, 15 and 16-year-olds, and we made shows for babies that they then performed to babies. I will not lie, it was a white knuckle ride. At the end of it, all of the teenagers said at one point or another that they had thought of leaving the project because it didn't make sense to them. And then on day 3, the babies came in and it all made sense. And at the evaluation that we did at the end of the project, I was really lucky that we were being tracked by researchers from ImaLab, which is a facility in Trinity College Dublin that works with the teenage brain. The teenagers said, we feel like different people, because that's the power of connection. And while I was still in Belfast, not content with making a load of baby shows, in 2015, I invited the whole city to join in, and we created the world's first baby day. And we spent a year connecting up with loads of arts organizations, loads of individuals, loads of non-arts organizations. And because of my connection with Suzanne, right from the beginning, I was saying, this is not a family fun day out. This is not just a family fun day out. It was a lot of fun. This is about the future. This is about hope. This is about the family that Belfast can be. And I was delighted that Suzanne came along and was there with us on Baby Day. And there's a video on my website that with both her and I talking about it. But actually the final story that I want to tell actually happened a few days before Baby Day and was one of the most surreal moments of my career. I got wind about a week before Baby Day that an organisation in Belfast, a very hard right organisation in Belfast called the Protestant Coalition, were planning to do what they were calling an anti-refugee, anti-immigration march outside City Hall on Baby Day. City Hall was one of our major venues. Belfast is a tricky city, and Suzanne described it once as a traumatised child, and I think that comes pretty close. And I felt that there was nothing that I could do. There was absolutely nothing that I could do. All I could do was hope, well, we've put events all over the city. It's only for an hour. Maybe it'll be okay. And then about 2 days before Baby Day, I got a call from the chief of police in Belfast saying, we want to try and get them to cancel their march. Would you come in and speak to them? So all 5'1" of me went into the Belfast Central Police Station, and I walked into a room of older white men whose trauma was writ large on their faces, the journeys that they had been through in their lives. And I was armed simply with a handful of Baby Day brochures, except I wasn't. I was armed with the power of connection, and I had Suzanne Zeedyk's voice whispering in my ear saying, curiosity, compassion. And the long and the short of it is, an hour later, the march was cancelled and they took their children to Baby Day. I am not going to pretend that it's a big solution. Of course, the march did eventually happen. But for one sunny Sunday in Belfast, hope conquered hate. And that's the power of connection. Thank you, Susan.
And what made it possible was that Anna understood and felt confident about the science of connection, so she could take that into that group and all the others. Most people in this world have no idea that there is such a thing as baby theater. Anna changes worlds. Starcatchers, who was in the film, who is based here in Scotland, changes babies' worlds. And when people can put that into practice and give baby art, babies art in the same way as adults have art, and we see that as a right, and truly we are changing worlds. Anna, don't stop. You're fab. Thank you.
Anna Newell, thank you very much indeed. A wonderful, wonderful story, and lots of messages coming in on the chat. And in particular, a number of people saying we need a Baby Day in Scotland, or we need a national Baby Day across the UK. Can you come back across and sort that out for us?
I'm very happy to come and talk to you about it so that you guys can make it happen however you want to make it happen.
Joking apart, I think it's on the cards. It's wonderful. Anna, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. Please stay with us until the end of the programme. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on. Some wonderful contributions. We've heard from education, the police, we've heard from parents, just heard from arts. So let's go on to business now, which is a massively important part, becoming a massively important part in terms of connection and how we actually operate businesses going forward, particularly after the past 15, 16 months. Pauline Scott, good evening, Pauline.
Good evening, Gary. How are you?
I am so good. Thank you very much indeed for asking. It's great to see you. You're the managing director of Tigers and Lullaby Lane Nurseries. I've been in your business. I've been blown over by it. It's wonderful, and I think we could spend hours talking about how you are bringing connection into your business. But give me an overview as to how you're using the science of connection in your businesses and the effect that it's been. The successful effects actually that it's currently having.
I will, Gary, and I'll try and be very, very quick. I feel really emotional, actually. I feel really emotional. Anna, that was just gorgeous, and some of the beautiful words that have already been said. So I'll try and do it without getting too emotional. I met Suzanne back in 2015, and my colleagues, Heather Monroe and Laura Falloon, had been to a conference. They'd heard her speak, and they said, Pauline, you must get this woman in to come in and talk to the team. And we were about 15 months into opening up Lullaby Lane at the time, and I phoned her, and she gave me an hour of her time on the phone. She said, what do you want to achieve? Let's talk it through. I really loved her whole style. I loved her approach. She came in, and what she did, and I think this is reflective across our whole businesses now, is she took what we were doing at an unconscious level and brought it to a conscious level. So we were working a lot from instinct, certainly at Lullaby Lane. And Suzanne walked in and she put the science behind everything that we were trying to do instinctively, just to love those children. And it was a really emotional moment. There was about 10 of us at the time. It was a really small team at Lullaby. Some of the team are here actually, and it was extremely emotional. We were crying. We were sitting thinking, oh my God, what have we done as parents? How were we parented? So we had all of that messy moment, as John has spoke about, and other people have spoke about, and we had those messy moments. And then we decided, okay, now what we've got is we've got this knowledge, and now we have to go and do something with it. Because see, once you know this, you cannot unknow it. And then you have that moral responsibility to do something about it. It's an ethical decision. And we decided we wanted to take that knowledge that we were learning at Lullaby Lane and bring that into Tigers. And it's fundamentally changed the way in which I live, I love, and I lead. And I know I have to talk about leadership today and to talk about business. And it is really weird and it is really countercultural to talk about attachment and early brain development when you're talking about business. But what it's really done for our organisation, Gary, is it has really allowed our team to explore who they are as human beings. We work in the business of supporting people to meet their goals, to develop their infinite potential. And what we need to do when we're in the lives of children and young people is we have to start with the adults that are present in the life of those children and young people. And interestingly, I contributed to a book by our colleague and friend Lisa Cherry, and my colleague Laura and I thought we were going on to talk about one thing, and we ended up talking about leadership. And it's really interesting that we keep bringing this back to the adults. But what happened with us at Tigers was we decided that we really wanted to embed this knowledge, that we wanted to walk the talk, that we didn't want to have values that were stuck up in a wall. We wanted to have values that were verbs, that we were doing this. And what I had went to Suzanne and said, after a number of years of working together, no, Suzanne, this isn't good enough. We need more. The team need to really build the knowledge. They need to really build the confidence. And we created a year-long program called Daring Ventures, which some of you might see on social media. And this was really for us to take the science of attachment theory, early brain development and human connection, broke it down into different concepts, and all 80 of our team at Tigers and Lullaby Lane go through this program, and they're all going through it at the same time. We've put a lot of time, a lot of investment into it. It's a monthly program. The team comes together and they are really taking all those different concepts and elements of attachment theory and thinking what that means for themselves and what it means in their practice in the lives of children and young people. And we had 3 aims of that program. We wanted to increase knowledge. We wanted to be able to apply the science into practice. So that academia versus practice, the two of them should definitely go together. And then we wanted to articulate that to a wider audience, to our partners, to our families. And I just want to read a couple of things about what it's done, because we talk about a triangle now in Tigers and Lullaby of self, organisation, and then what we're going to do externally. And some of the things that have come back from our team in terms of what it's done for them. And here's some quotes. Learning to view from the inside to connect with the outside. I now assume that everybody is trying their best. Attachment is like the trunk of the tree, and all the elements that we've been learning are all the branches. Knowledge gives confidence to take responsibility for your own life and create the change you want. And then somebody had wrote back to us recently when we asked for feedback of the team, this is life-changing. I felt guilty for coming back to my work as a mother of 2 boys. What Daring Ventures has taught me is that I don't need to feel shame and I don't need to feel guilt at wanting something for myself. Now I am a woman with more belief in myself than I ever thought. That is the power that this is having, because what that does for us as a business is we have got people that are coming to their work who are understanding themselves. They are taking this knowledge into their personal lives. We have members of our team that are coming back and saying, I parent differently. I'm a different wife, a different husband, different partner. We have leaders within our business who really understand human behavior. We're able to use a common language of things like we're having a rupture, now we're having a repair. We're setting emotional boundaries. We talk about emotional regulation. And all of that sounds really weird to talk about in terms of business. And the way that I always respond back to that when people are skeptical, because lots of people really are skeptical, is that all our traditional metrics of increased profit, growth, expansion, low labour turnover, low absence rates, they are all going in the right direction. Our businesses went through cultural transformation because of understanding the science and applying it in daily life, because all businesses is relationships. That is all it is. And people talk about that all the time in business. They talk about people come first, but I think it's a bit tokenistic. And I think what we're really trying to do is to embed that and to make that cultural change. And I think that's what the science has done for us.
Wonderful. Pauline, thank you very much indeed. Suzanne, briefly, do you want to come back?
I know that you're trying hard to keep us to the time that I gave you. We're just all going to have to relax into, I got all these enthusiastic people. So if we have to relax the time a wee bit, thank you for that. Can I just add the idea that there are businesses who can weave science and connection into the heart of their ethos and their culture will make a different world. And what Tigers and Lullaby Lane have taught me is the power of a common language. Rarely do I get to work with a whole organization. And when I watch a whole group of people embrace that language and embed it at the heart of what they do, well, I know is that what changes the world is when we can find ways to think together on the same plane. So Pauline, you and Tigers and Lullaby Lane have taught me as much as I ever taught you. Thank you.
Gary, can I come back in, please, if I
can,
and I'm really conscious of time as well. I think the 2 key things that I've learned about this is that change is uncomfortable and growth is really messy. And I want to thank Suzanne for being brave, for challenging our thinking, and for being courageous and really intentional in our actions. It helps us all to think about our need to be courageous and brave when trying to make change in our lives, in our work, and advancing towards the world in which we want to live. So I thank you for being our partner. I thank you for being my friend and an absolute unwavering source of inspiration to me. Thank you very much, and inspire on.
Lovely messages coming in. David Cameron, who we know is with us tonight. Pauline Scott is a wonderfully courageous generation and simply outstanding leader. What a lovely way to end that. And thank you for your contribution, David. Okay, from business, let's move on to history. Our penultimate guest, if you like, for this evening is Jeremy Auld. Hello, Jeremy.
Hello, Gary. Lovely to be here.
It's so good to see you. So good to see you. And are you in Dundee?
No, currently in Oxfordshire.
Oh, beautiful.
But was based in Dundee, and that's of course how I got to know Suzanne.
You, the provost of St Paul's Cathedral.
I was indeed, yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like you've got a beautiful Oxfordshire evening coming through your windows there. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, I don't want to make anybody jealous, but we've had 26 degrees and blazing sunshine here. So it has been lovely today.
Well, I've got to say, Jeremy, it's not been bad up north either. I have to say, we've been enjoying some sunshine. Thank you for your patience. It's so good to see you.
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about your background with Suzanne and how connection came into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to know Suzanne back in 2010. And as Pauline just said a few minutes ago, she, as we all know, is a most inspirational speaker. And of course, most inspirational speakers require to themselves be inspired. And I think it was 2013, Suzanne came to me and said, I've discovered something really, really exciting, that there's this woman who died about 100 years ago, but who I am really inspired by, and who's been largely forgotten by the people of Dundee, but was an inspired and inspirational person herself, who, although she might not have used the language of connection, she definitely got connection. And she was very much a leading light of her time. And I mean, so Suzanne really, she'd discovered this woman called Mary Lily Walker, and she had also discovered that Mary Lily Walker had been a member of St Paul's Cathedral in Dundee, and that she had been very much inspired by her own Christian faith. And so Suzanne was quite excited about uncovering the history of Mary Lily Walker and celebrating that. And so that's where I came in. Suzanne wanted to have a special event, and we had great fun doing this. We had, I suppose, we had a service where we celebrated her life, but we also had almost like a masked ball. It was a fancy dress dinner where we moved into the old Victorian schoolhouse, and we had a dinner of in the time of Mary Lily Walker, celebrating her story. And most of you won't know what that story is, so if I can very briefly just say something about her.
Of course.
As many cities, Dundee towards the end of the 19th century was a place of contrasts. It still is, but it was a place where the very smart townhouses of merchants and professionals sat absolutely cheek by jowl alongside jute factories, which in turn sat alongside some of the most squalid slums that existed anywhere. And in fact, there are writings of the time that say that, you know, raw sewage sat in piles in the narrow rat-infested streets, waiting for the scavengers to come and collect it, to dump it in the Tay. And so life was really quite difficult for very, very many people. And in this city of contrast, Mary Lily Walker lived, but she was actually at the upper end of society. She was the daughter of a well-heeled solicitor. She'd been educated at Dundee High School, which for those of you who are not from Dundee is an independent school in the centre of Dundee. She was one of the first students at the then new University College in Dundee. So she was a woman of privilege, but she was also, as I say, a woman of deep faith. And as a member of St Paul's Cathedral, which was right in the middle of this squalor, she had been taught that Jesus was to be found among the squalor of the jute workers, as well as in the beauty of the services. So the tradition of Christ and the poor had rubbed off on her and her mother. And so Mary Lily Walker realized that she needed to do something more than just chuck money at the poverty that she saw around her. So she immersed herself in social work throughout the city, and she was particularly affected by the plight of young mothers and children. And so she was a real trailblazer, because in the course of her work in Dundee, she started the first women's restaurant in the UK, and she provided food for nursing mothers, providing that they breastfed the newborn and stayed away from work for 3 months after their baby was born. And of course, the real intention of that was to provide sustenance, which would improve the quality of the mother's milk. She helped to found a women's hospital in Dundee, where women could be treated by women doctors, which was very unusual. It was very successful. until, of course, it was subsumed into the NHS in 1948. And she founded a milk depot for children. She founded a children's clinic in Dundee, and especially for disabled children. And she started holiday trips for some of Dundee's poorest children. So an amazing woman. But what really inspired Suzanne, I remember her telling me, and in turn me when Suzanne approached me, was that she had been a co-writer of, and principally the main author, of a really highly influential report called the Social Union Report, and it was written in 1905. And it detailed the deplorable working and living conditions in Dundee and highlighted the dreadful child mortality rate. And that publication went on to be talked about in Parliament, and it was influential in many, many social reforms. And she appeared at the Royal Commission to explain her work. And that is still very widely quoted in historical documents. And she started with her own money the Grey Lodge settlement, which educated social workers and offered classes and activities for children. So she very much, as I say earlier, was a trailblazer and was a huge inspiration for Suzanne. And it was exciting to be able to explore that with Suzanne and to celebrate her. And we also did a pilgrimage to her grave, which was all overgrown, and we managed to get that uncovered. So it was in Balgay Cemetery in Dundee. So it was fantastic. And I know that example of Mary Lily Walker was very much about connecting with children and recognizing the value in children. So hugely exciting. And I'm so delighted that that inspiration has led to Suzanne doing this amazing work that she has done over the last 10 years and will continue to do into the future.
Jeremy, the reason I'm so delighted that you can tell that story and that I wanted it featured tonight is that until we had those commemorative events to mark the centenary of her death, Mary Lily Walker had been forgotten in Dundee. Jeremy has just told the story of this massively creative woman who was determined to change her world, and she was forgotten to us. And now Mary Lily Walker is restored to the memory of the city, and it came about because of the centenary event, which would have been possible without your leadership and without Eddie Small, who wrote a biography of her and who is no longer with us in the last year.
Absolutely. And I have to say, though, Suzanne, it was your infectious passion and enthusiasm that got us all fired up to uncover this wonderful history and inspirational woman. So thank you for that.
It takes all our voices to make it happen.
Thank you very much indeed. Jeremy, thank you. On to our final guests, and we're going to the States. We are going to Woodstock, New York, I believe. Jude Asfar. Hello, Jude. Good morning to you, would it be?
Yes, good morning. No, good afternoon.
It's so good to see you. Good to see you. One of Suzanne's longest supporters, I understand, hosted a Connected Baby event in the States in New York, 2011, I think. Tell me a little bit about your background, your history, and how the science of connection has affected your life, Jude.
One of my big passions these days, and for some decades, has been the whole issue of the environment and Mother Earth. And I was lucky enough to be brought up in Dunkeld, and in some of the most beautiful places in Scotland, which are still in my bones, although I'm here in the Hudson Valley. And when I met Suzanne, I absolutely fell upon her and what she was doing, and the extent to which she was making hard science accessible to anybody, everybody, and the passion with which she wanted to do so and did so and has done so. And I'm really, there's so much I want to say, and there's so little to say because of what has been said today already, not least in the chat column and live from everybody. And I'm really deeply touched and humbled by it. And it's really extraordinary to see the impact that you've made, Suzanne, and how many lives you have touched and how needed it is. And it actually makes me kind of angry that it has taken so long for this work of yours and for what you're standing for to be acknowledged, and how much in my framing it is to do with the issue of women and gender and inequality. And as such, I want to bow deeply to the men involved here, to any of the men who've spoken up, because the whole issue of feelings, you know, for many years, men have been sort of discouraged at best from acknowledging the vulnerability of feelings and whatnot. And as a consequence, the very left hemisphere, systemic, reductionist world of laws and language has been dictated by men, and we all exist within that. And that means that there has been very little honoring of the feminine, of feelings, of mothering, of humanity's humanity. And with that, as far as I'm concerned, goes sort of Mother Earth, goes our source, goes the life source that comes through mother and mothering, and how easy that has been to just dismiss and discredit. And the fact that this is so exceptional, and that what we are leaving the young people that you all fight for and work for so hard is such a damn burden now, that it's very easy to get into a state of dismay. But what you guys are doing is real reason for hope, and for the desperate change that's needed if we are going to change what we're doing. If we don't change, we're going to end up where we're headed, which is not good. So more power to all of you, more power to Scotland for picking up these pieces. The Scotland I left 40 years ago would never have done this, I don't think. And it's just lovely to see progress and change actually does happen. And I bow to all of you and thank all of you. There's so much more I could say, but I'll refrain now because it really has all been said that has any meaning.
Jude, what I love about you is that you never ever let me talk about connection to each other without also talking about connection to the earth. And in the end, I think that is all we have. There is connection to each other, and there is connection to the earth. And of all the people who taught me of connection to the earth, it is my father, who also envisions a different world for us in the earth and the environment. And Jude's comments tonight help us bring together the sense of relationships to ourselves and each other, and insist that we think about the relationship to our earth. And if we do not do more of that, there will no longer be an us here. So Jude ends this evening by helping us to think about the really broad picture that connection forces us to see. And Jude, I am honored that you wanted to be here tonight to help us to do that. Thank you.
It's very mutual.
Here, here. Jude, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. So we're on to into the final furlong, really, and it has been a real celebration. I think we've kept the balance right, Suzanne, between your work and the science of connection. I hope that that's the case, and certainly we've had everybody actually has been a wonderful storyteller tonight. It's just been absolutely captivating. What are you thinking, Suzanne?
It takes all our voices. I want to be part of a big choir. And that's what I have heard tonight, is a big choir of people singing about the importance of connection. And every time we tell another person, that song gets louder.
This is my glass to you. You've got a glass, and I think we've got people on screen who've got a glass. So Suzanne, may I be the one to take the lead on this and say many congratulations for the past 10 years. Here's to the next 10. And I think, one thing that I've noticed from our past 2 hours together is how much joy there has been in this program. So whether that's from the contributors or indeed whether that's from the photographs of the children, it's just been absolutely full of joy. And that's exactly what you and your work bring to the world. So thank you very much indeed. And here's to you, to Connected Baby and the next 10 years. Cheers. Everybody, all 400 of you come off mute, please. So could all 400 of you seriously come off mute?
Wish you hadn't said that.
There we go. So we want just one last thing. I'd like to record this for prosperity, and I'm going to count you down, and we just want everybody after 3 to say goodbye in their own language and just give us a big wave. So I will count you down, and then we'll go our separate ways for this Monday evening. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. I hope you've thoroughly enjoyed the program. I certainly have. It's been a pleasure to host it. So let's do a countdown, and we'll go 3, 2, 1, and then everybody shout goodbye. Are you ready? I think we're ready.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Here we go. And 3,
goodbye.
2, 1. Goodbye.
Bye. Au revoir.